I didn't even get a warning. No formal write-up, no private meeting. Just a hollow knock on the glass pane of my office and the cold eyes of Mr. Sutherland, the same man who once praised me for saving the quarter. "Emily, HR needs to speak with you. Now." Something about the way he said it, flat, clipped, like a line rehearsed, made my stomach sink before I even stood up. I glanced at my monitor. Emails half-written. Reports open. My coffee still warm. It was like my life had been paused mid-sentence. As I followed him through the quiet corridor, something felt off. Colleagues avoided my gaze. One even looked guilty, like he knew something I didn't. My chest tightened. I had no idea why, but my instincts whispered the same thing over and over. This isn't just a meeting. You're walking into a trap. When I stepped into the HR room, there were already two people inside. Kendra from Human Resources and a man I'd never seen before. A legal advisor, maybe? He didn't smile. I sat down, heart pounding. The room was silent for a second too long before Kendra cleared her throat. "Emily, we've received several complaints about your conduct. Effective immediately, your position has been terminated." "What?" I laughed, sharp, nervous, like it belonged to someone else. "Is this a joke? Complaints? About me?" I had been with the company for 7 years. Started as an assistant, worked my way up to operations lead. Took the worst shifts. Managed impossible clients. Stayed late more times than I could count. I was even told just last week I was being considered for a regional manager. This didn't make sense. Kendra avoided my eyes. "You're being placed on administrative leave while we conduct a full internal review. You'll be escorted out today." I turned to the other man. "What complaints? From whom?" He opened a manila file. "We are not authorized to disclose names, but the allegations include verbal misconduct, inappropriate delegation, and failure to follow procedural directives." I blinked. I couldn't even process the words. My voice cracked. "I've never broken a protocol. Not once. And you both know that." Silence. I looked at Kendra again. She wouldn't even look at me. There was something deeper happening here. This wasn't a performance issue. It was an ambush. And I wasn't supposed to fight back. I was supposed to accept it, gather my things quietly, and leave through the side door like a criminal. But something inside me refused to shrink. I stood. "Fine. If that's how this is going to go, then give me the paperwork. I'm not signing anything, but I'll take a copy." The man nodded and passed it across the table. As I reached for it, a corner of the file slid open and I saw it. A printed email thread with my name in bold. Highlighted. Forwarded. Replied. Manipulated. A small part of me wanted to scream. Another part went stone-cold calm. Someone had gone to great lengths to make it look like I was incompetent. And someone else had believed it. I walked out of that room like a ghost. Eyes forward. Jaw clenched, pulse thudding in my ears. I didn't speak to anyone as I returned to my desk. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. But I looked around at every coworker who avoided my gaze, every office I'd once helped organize, every system I had fine-tuned. This wasn't just betrayal. It was erasure. I packed my things into a cardboard box, as if on autopilot. My photo frame. My desk plant. A copy of a presentation I had given to the board 2 months ago that increased profit margins by 11%. They had forgotten that already? No. Someone wanted them to forget. As I left the building, I passed a glass conference room. Inside it, my manager, Greg Wallace, was laughing with 2 other executives. My replacement, maybe? He turned and looked at me. And he smiled. That was when I knew. He had done it. Greg had been after my position since last year, ever since I started outperforming him. I had the ear of upper management. Clients preferred dealing with me. My department ran smoother. Greg saw the writing on the wall. So instead of rising to meet me, he dug under. It wasn't just ambition. It was sabotage. I didn't sleep that night. I barely blinked. I went over every project, every message, every whisper in the office I had ignored. I thought of the small inconsistencies, like being left out of certain meetings, or how some emails I never received, but people claimed I had. They had been laying this groundwork for months. and I had walked right into it. But what they didn't know was that I had kept everything. Every document, every login, every backup. I wasn't just a model employee. I was the system that kept the company standing. And if they thought they could destroy me quietly and go on like nothing happened, they had underestimated the wrong woman. The next morning, I didn't wake up with grief. I woke up with fire. I poured myself a cup of black coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my old laptop. Not the company one, they'd already revoked my access. But I had backups. Call it paranoia, call it diligence, but over the years, I'd stored copies of my reports, key communications, even versions of company policies. Not to spy or be sneaky, but to protect myself. Now, that instinct was my lifeline. Click after click, file after file, I started seeing it more clearly. Changes in timestamps, inconsistencies in forwarded messages, fabricated claims in official documents. Greg hadn't just lied, he had manipulated data. And, the worst part, he had help. There were emails where Kendra from HR responded in odd ways, like she was covering tracks. One message from Greg said, "Make sure this aligns with what we discussed. She's out of the loop now." Another said, "We'll make it seem like she dropped the ball, shouldn't be hard." I wanted to scream. I had given everything to that place. My weekends, my health, my peace of mind. I missed my sister's wedding because of a client crisis. I once worked through a sinus infection with a fever. For what? To be written off like a defective part? By mid-morning, I wasn't sad anymore. I was focused. I made a list of people I knew I could trust. It was short, very short. At the top was Mia Daniels, my old coworker who had left the company 6 months ago after a disagreement with Greg. I messaged her on LinkedIn. "Can we talk? It's about the company. Something serious." She replied almost immediately. "Been waiting for this. Call me." When we spoke, her voice was sharp, angry. "Emily, I knew something wasn't right when they started shutting you out. Greg did the same to me. He tried to frame me for losing a contract I never even handled." I felt a chill. "So this is a pattern." "Absolutely," she said. "He's been cleaning house, getting rid of anyone who could expose him." Together, we started mapping it out. Projects reassigned at the last minute. Budget adjustments without approvals. Client records altered. It was more than workplace bullying. It was strategic elimination. And it was happening under everyone's noses. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, a realization hit me like thunder. Greg wasn't trying to just remove me. He was trying to rewrite history to make sure he looked like the genius, and I became a footnote. And the company? It was blindly enabling him. I started gathering every thread. Not just my own files, but notes from conversations, copies of Slack messages I had saved, screenshots from group chats where I was suddenly forgotten. The more I dug, the more the puzzle pieces fell into place. But there was one major problem. I didn't have access to their internal systems anymore. Until the next morning, when I received an anonymous email. Subject: "You deserve to know." Attached, a link to a private drive with internal files, meeting recordings, HR logs, and chat transcripts. I hesitated. Clicking this could be dangerous. But my hands moved on their own. And what I saw made my blood run cold. A voice recording of Greg saying, "She's too competent. If she stays, I'm out of a job. We need to play this smart." Another file, a memo draft suggesting I was non-collaborative and volatile, traits no one had ever accused me of. I couldn't breathe. Someone inside was leaking this to me. Someone wanted me to fight back. But that also meant someone inside knew I was getting close to the truth. I started watching my surroundings more. Checking behind me. Looking twice at unfamiliar cars parked near my building. Paranoia crept in like smoke. Then came the message that pushed me over the edge. From an unknown number. "You should stop. You won't win this." No name. No context. Just a threat. I stared at my phone. My hands shook. For a brief second, I considered walking away. Just disappearing. Starting over somewhere new. But then I remembered Greg's smile as I walked out of the building. The arrogance. The entitlement. The satisfaction. And I made a decision. I wasn't going to run. I was going to take everything he built on my back and burn it down. The next morning, I received an unexpected call from a blocked number. Emily Carter? The voice on the other end asked. Yes. This is Laurentian. I used to work with Greg Wallace at Vextra Corp before he joined your company. I heard what happened to you. I think we need to talk. I paused. How did you even get my number? Someone you trust gave it to me. I promise I'm not the enemy. You're not the first person Greg's tried to destroy. That was all I needed to hear. We met later that day at a quiet cafe outside the city, someplace I wouldn't be recognized. Lauren walked in wearing sunglasses, a baseball cap, and a guarded expression. When she sat down, she looked around before speaking. I don't know how deep you're into this, but I'm going to tell you the truth, she said. Greg has a long history of climbing over people's backs. At Vextra, he did the same thing, set people up, falsified documentation, stole project credit. We tried to report him, but he had already charmed the board. One of us got fired. One had a mental breakdown. I resigned before I became his next target. My breath caught in my throat. She reached into her bag and slid over a flash drive. Everything I had back then. I thought it was useless. But it matches the pattern you're seeing now, doesn't it? I nodded slowly. Exactly. I spent the rest of the evening comparing her files with mine, email patterns, phrasing, tactics. He hadn't just manipulated data. He had a formula. And I saw something that stunned me. There was a fake consulting firm in both companies' records, used as a third-party scapegoat in reports. But it didn't exist. It was a shell. Greg had created it. And that firm had billed the company tens of thousands in consulting fees. He wasn't just sabotaging people. He was embezzling. For a moment, I couldn't even process the weight of it. Then I remembered the board meeting Greg had led 2 months ago, where he presented cost-saving measures that made him look like a miracle worker. What if those numbers were based on lies? On stolen funds? On numbers he manipulated using my projects? He didn't just destroy me for power. He did it to hide a crime. The next day, I got another email from the anonymous source. Look deeper into strategic partnerships. Folder marked Evergreen Transition Plan. That was an internal folder I had created over a year ago. It contained documents related to a high-level merger proposal we had started with a mid-tier tech firm. A deal I had initiated, something that could have been huge for the company. I thought it was shelved. When I opened the folder, my heart dropped. The proposal was there. All of it. But my name was removed. Greg had taken full credit. He didn't just remove me from the company. He stole my biggest work and presented it as his own. And the proposal? It had gone through. It was the reason he'd been promoted to interim VP. I pushed away from my desk, shaking. I had been erased, replaced, lied about, and no one in the company even questioned it. But now I had proof. All I needed was a way to make it public. That night, I lay in bed replaying every conversation I'd had with him. His fake encouragement. The way he complimented me in front of the team but excluded me behind closed doors. He had set this up perfectly, and I had been too loyal, too trusting to see it. I remembered a specific moment, months before my firing. Greg had accidentally shared a folder with me during a team review. It was empty, quickly removed, and he brushed it off as a mistake. But I remember the name of that folder. EC Offload. EC, Emily Carter. At the time, I thought it was nothing. Now, I knew it was the beginning of my elimination plan. I started documenting everything. Organizing files, emails, statements. I made a spreadsheet. Every lie, every fake email, every stolen credit. But the deeper I got, the more I started questioning everything. How many other people were just like me? How many had lost their careers, reputations, sanity, because of one man's climb? And how could the company not have known? Then came the final reveal. Mia messaged me again. Check out the ownership structure of that shell company. There's a board member listed as co-signer. I dug into the records. There it was. A familiar name. Kenneth R. Malone. Senior board advisor. One of the men who sat silently during my HR meeting. He wasn't just complicit. He was involved. This wasn't just about Greg. It was a cover-up. The company had protected him because he was making them money. They didn't care how. They didn't care who he destroyed to get there. And suddenly I realized this wasn't just personal anymore. This was war. The next morning, I woke up with a cold, calculated clarity. I wasn't going to take this to HR. I wasn't going to email the board. I knew better now. If I wanted justice, I had to fight the way they fought, ruthlessly, strategically, without blinking. I reached out to Lauren and Mia and laid out my plan. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Mia asked. "Once you cross this line, there's no going back," I finished. "I know." We formed a silent alliance, 3 women, all wronged by the same man, bound by the same fire. I spent the next 3 days preparing a digital evidence file, organized, indexed, encrypted. It included timelines, emails, whistleblower reports, and records of Greg's fraudulent shell company transactions. But the real ace? A video compilation of Greg's voice recordings, taken from internal meeting clips, confidential memos, and leaked audio, where he blatantly mocked people, bragged about manipulating staff, and even admitted he'd cleaned out the dead weight. Dead weight. That's what he'd called me. I uploaded everything to a secure drive. Then, I reached out to a contact I hadn't spoken to in years, Jessica Tran, a tech journalist known for exposing corporate corruption. We'd met at a panel in Chicago once. I remembered her saying, "If you ever get your hands on something that could bring down an empire, call me." So I did. Jessica responded within minutes. "Holy sh*T, she said after reviewing the files. "Emily, this is massive. If you give me clearance, I can publish this within 72 hours. My throat tightened. Do it. But I wasn't done. I printed hard copies of everything. And on the morning of the board's quarterly strategy meeting, where Greg would be presenting his next big expansion idea, I walked into the building. Uninvited. Unannounced. I wore a black blazer, held my head high, and carried a manila envelope like it was a sword. The receptionist blinked when she saw me. "Emily, you're not." "I'm here to return something that belongs to me," I said, smoothly, and walked past her. When I entered the glass conference room, silence fell. Greg froze mid-sentence, holding a slide remote in one hand and a coffee cup in the other. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Emily," he said, his voice cracking just slightly. "You're not scheduled." "I don't need to be scheduled," I said. My voice was steady. I looked each board member in the eye. "You've been lied to." One of the older board members frowned. "What's going on?" I dropped the envelope on the table. Evidence of fraud, misrepresentation, and embezzlement. Greg Wallace has been using a fake consulting firm to siphon company money. He's also stolen project credit, including the Evergreen merger, which, as you'll see, was my intellectual property. And he's done this all with the support, or ignorance, of this board. Gasps. Raised brows. Confused glances. Greg's face went pale. This is insane. She's a disgruntled ex-employee. Jessica's timing was perfect. As if on cue, everyone's phones buzzed. Breaking. Internal whistleblower exposes corruption at leading tech firm, exclusive audio included. I watched them scramble, eyes wide, scrolling in disbelief. "Is that your voice in the recordings, Greg?" I asked. He opened his mouth, closed it, then looked at Kenneth R. Malone, who looked equally stricken. The chairman stood. "We need to adjourn this meeting immediately." "No," I said firmly. "You need to hear all of it. Because this isn't just about me. It's about every person you've allowed Greg to silence, destroy, and discard while he built an empire on our backs." Greg slammed his folder shut. "You can't prove." "I can," I snapped, stepping closer. "I have everything. Documents. Recordings. Witnesses. And now the media." He reached for his phone, muttering something under his breath. Maybe to call legal. Maybe to call PR. It was too late. The world already knew. And he knew it too. For the first time since this all began, I saw him afraid. Really afraid. The board turned on him almost instantly. People he once joked with now looked at him like a virus had just been detected in the bloodstream. I didn't stay for the rest of the fallout. I walked out with my head high, my spine unshaken. But I wasn't done yet. Later that evening, the company issued a public statement. Effective immediately, Greg Wallace has been placed on administrative leave pending internal investigation. A follow-up report revealed that Kenneth R. Malone had quietly resigned. The stock dipped temporarily. But the real damage? It was internal. Dozens of current and former employees reached out to me. Their stories echoed mine. Stories of sabotage, stolen work, false accusations. We began forming a case together. A collective voice. And then, 2 weeks later, I received the most unexpected call. From the board. They wanted to meet. They asked me to consult. Then, they offered me something I never anticipated.
Equity.
As part of a restructuring strategy to rebuild trust, they offered me a leadership role with ownership stakes. After everything they let happen to me, after everything Greg tried to destroy, I didn't say yes right away. But I also didn't say no. It's been 6 months since that day. Since I walked back into the building that tried to bury me. Since I took back the voice they tried to silence. Since I turned the tables so hard, they shattered beneath the weight of truth. The media called it one of the most dramatic whistleblower reversals in recent corporate history. Internally, they called it the Carter Reformation.
Me?
I just called it survival. But surviving didn't come without a price. I accepted the board's offer. Not out of revenge. Not out of ego. But because I wanted to change the very system that allowed someone like Greg Wallace to rise unchecked for so long. I took the equity. I took the title, Chief Ethics Officer. And then I started digging deeper. The rot in the company ran deeper than anyone realized. Greg hadn't just manipulated numbers. He created a culture of silence, fear, and competition so cutthroat it turned smart people into pawns. I made it my mission to burn that culture to the ground. I rebuilt the HR protocols. I introduced anonymous reporting systems that actually worked. I promoted whistleblowers instead of punishing them. And most importantly, I created a fund to support employees who had been wrongfully terminated or driven out during the Wallace era. People started walking taller again, smiling, believing. But not everything was easy. There were meetings where some board members still looked at me like a liability. There were whispers. There was resentment. And there were days I sat alone in my glass office and wondered if I was becoming the very thing I fought against. Power does that. It sneaks up on you. It whispers. It tempts you to forget the pain that brought you here. But every time I felt myself slipping, I remembered the night I sat on my apartment floor, surrounded by ruined dreams, while my world crumbled. I remembered that girl. That version of me. Raw, betrayed, furious. I kept her close. She was my compass. One morning, I got a letter. No return address. Inside was a simple piece of paper. Just one line. You weren't supposed to win. But damn you did. It wasn't signed. But I knew it was from him.
Greg.
The investigation had dragged on for months, but with the mountain of evidence, the result was inevitable. He lost everything. His title, his reputation, his silence. The last I heard, he was living in a small town trying to start over. Some said he was bitter. Others said he was broken. I didn't really care. He was a shadow now. But one shadow still lingered. About a month ago, while reviewing internal system logs, I found something unsettling. An access code had been used, an old one. A code that hadn't been active since the Greg Wallace era. It led to a private digital folder. Inside were files, drafted strategies, confidential messages, and something else. A list. Titled, Next Targets. And at the top of the list, my name. It was dated 2 years ago. 2 years before I was fired. He had been planning my fall long before I ever suspected him. I stared at that screen for a long time, the room quiet except for the hum of the AC. And then I did something I didn't expect. I smiled. Because I had survived every bullet he loaded. Every trap he set. And I hadn't just made it out. I had risen higher than he ever imagined. But the final twist? That folder had a second list. allies to eliminate. And on that list was Kenneth R. Malone. Greg hadn't just used him. He planned to take him down too eventually. There were no friends in Greg Wallace's world. Only pieces. I printed the list, framed it, and hung it on the back wall of my office, not as a trophy, but as a warning. A reminder that the people who smile in meetings can hide daggers behind their backs. Today, when I walk the halls of the company I now partly own, I'm not the same woman they tried to destroy. I'm sharper, quieter, more dangerous. I still wear the same heels, still smile, still shake hands. But now they know, they all know, that I am not to be underestimated, that I am not afraid, that I am the storm they never saw coming. And sometimes, just sometimes, when I stand in the elevator alone and hear the soft hum of the building around me, I whisper to myself, "You tried to erase me.
But now?
I sign your paychecks.